Good morning. Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. Good morning. Good morning. Everybody's feeling okay. The weather is not making me feel exactly excited to be awake this early, but I hear it's going to be like that for 2 days. So we got to hang with it and try to live our lives and not be let down by that. I'm just let down because my dogs are not fans. So it's a much harder situation in the morning than a normal day. Okay, the first thing I'm going to show everybody today is where I posted the class Zoom recording to make sure that everybody can find that if they need that in the future. And then we'll go into what we were working on last class. And as I met with a student, I'll talk about it in a little bit, but we did the harder question first as a class. The second question was easier, and I'm so sorry. We'll do that together and we'll make a little bit more sense of it if we were confused by question number 1 at the end of class on Tuesday. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. We still have a couple minutes till we officially start, so you guys can hang out with me.
I have a question. Are exams, are they open book or no?
So the book itself is an electronic resource, so that's a little bit more challenging. So we
like
can
written notes.
Yeah, we consider them to be open note as long as the notes are physically printed. You can have any notes that you want in front of you. So that includes all notes for my class, all packets, all take-home quizzes, anything we've done. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, that's our advantage to being in the situation that we're in, in our being at home, and that's a little bit different than being on campus. And the coordinators decided that if you were on campus and took a class face-to-face, that yes, you could physically write on the exam, but that you could only bring a page of notes with you.
Okay.
And here online, we don't get to physically write, we have to type. So that's a little bit more challenging. So we're going to allow everybody to have access to all of their resources instead of having to limit that. Okay,
great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the format of the test changed just slightly to your benefit as a student this semester. So I haven't seen the new exams yet because it's day 2, but the formatting will allow students to kind of go back and forth. And in the past exams, the coordinators had you go in order, and you literally could not go back and see your previous submission once you had answered the question. And that is just not even a best practice on how to take a test. Like whenever I don't consider myself a great test taker. Like I don't think I'm really good at memorizing things, but I've learned how to take a test, right? Like read the whole test, do the questions that I think are the easiest first, and then go back and work on the ones that I find that are the hardest. And I couldn't even tell my students to do that in the past online. So I'm really excited that this semester, you can actually move forward, go back, feel like if you don't know question number 1, you don't have to spend 25 minutes trying to figure it out and lose your time later. So I'm excited for those changes and to have you guys feel less stressed in that situation. I think we're going to just feel better overall based on the new testing requirements. So it was a great question. The question that Kate had asked, just for the people who are filtering in, it was a great question. And I glossed over it, barely touched on it because, but it's really important in my opinion. there's a difference between taking a class in the scheduled remote, which is my Zoom format, versus a face-to-face class. And that's just in the format of the testing, right? So if we were in a face-to-face class on campus, we would take the test on paper. So that would be a slight advantage, right? Because we're used to writing math by hand and everything. But if we were on campus, we would limit the amount of resources you could bring to the test to a page of notes. The fact that we're taking the test on campus in a scheduled remote format, we'll have to type our responses in, which will be a little bit of a new scenario, but we will have access to all of our notes, right? So you can use any of the resources that you've accumulated throughout the whole unit. And I don't necessarily recommend like, I'm going to flip through my 30-page packet to figure out the right answer, right? That's a lot of paper, but I do recommend maybe having it there to, as a, just in case the example is really similar and you recognize it and you can flip through it and find it really fast, So I do think that it's a difference from last semester that will make everybody feel better. The other thing I was discussing is that if you had students, no, that's me. If you had friends that took the class before in the same format, the tests were really challenging because they were forced to move forward and never backwards, right? So you had to move forward with confidence. Like, I got my question right, now I can go to question number 2, and I could never go back and look at question number 1 again. Well, that's changed. This semester, you can move forward and backward in your test. So you can skip a question and come back to it later, okay? Which is just a huge benefit to you, that you don't have to feel rushed to answer something and then move on to the stuff that you quote know better, right? You can do those questions first and then come and spend a little bit more time on the ones that were a little bit more challenging for you. I know like tests I read a lot of my first day submissions already. You did a great job. Thank you so much. If it was submitted after the due date, I haven't had a chance to look at them. And I also saw that a bunch of people turned in their videos for Introduce Yourself. So I'm really excited. I've already seen a bunch of those too, but I was kind of I went through the wrong way, not the way I could grade them. I was just like watching them, getting like, oh, you guys are so, and then I was like, oh crap, I can't grade any of them the way that I'm watching them. So I have to go back and I have to watch them so I can give you comments and grade them. So that was my fault, but I was getting too excited to hear you guys speak to one another and to introduce yourselves. So that was really great. I was really excited, but a lot of people were like, I hate taking tests and tests make me really nervous. And I know that's a big chunk of our grade. So me addressing it now, I'm just trying to alleviate some of that stress that you're going to have when you get into that point in studying. And there's a whole module in Canvas that has all the information you need for each exam. So there's like a review and the formatting guidelines and all that stuff that you can, like we can see in the Canvas site. So speaking of Canvas, I wanted to show everybody very quickly before we begin where I hid your Zoom recording from last class, right? Just in case everybody wants to access any of that information. So if you go to modules, scroll to the Unit 1 module, and I put it at the bottom of the Unit 1 module. Okay, so it's all the way at the bottom, Unit 1 Zoom recordings, and it's just a blank page now, but it'll just get populated every class. We'll have a new link right there. Okay, and I'll try to be semi-descriptive, right? Like, so we just talked about the class and we did sampling methods. So I'll try to help you guys out. Like, if you want to find a topic and not a specific day that was missed, okay, that'll be my goal. And then just to clarify, I'm going to minimize these just so I can see a little bit better here. But if you go underneath your Unit 1 module, there's a Unit 1 exam module, and it has like all the rules, and that's what I was talking about. Okay, and then this is just a placeholder to tell us when we're going to take it, but the exam will go in here too, and then we'll all be able to click on it together on the day when we take the test. Okay, so that was just to clarify anything that I had said that might be confusing. We didn't know what I was talking about. Are there any questions about the Zoom recordings, the test format that I was just discussing, any of that? Are we like ready to talk about chapter 1? I'm so ready because I felt like I gave you guys a harder question first than I needed to, right? And I was in office hours yesterday with one of my students from my fully online section, which means they don't have a Zoom session, right? And we were going over the questions and I was like, oh man, number 2 was way easier for you than number 1. We should have started there as a class together on Tuesday. And I'm so sorry to everybody. So we're going to jump in. We've already answered question number 1 together as a class. I remember us doing that on Tuesday. So just to reiterate, I know that when I share my packet in this format, right? You know what, guys, I'm not even on Zoom on my iPad. I'm only in here once. That's why I was like looking for how to write. I can't unless I join in. Sorry, I thought I was ready.
Maybe I could ask one logistical question while you're doing that.
Yeah.
I just want to confirm on Alex that I think you said only the assignments in the textbook were the only thing that matter. So when we log on and it's like, hey, work on that pie chart, do we not need to do that pie chart or we do?
Yeah, Alex forces us as creators of the class to make a pie, right? And we don't want that specifically for statistics. So the coordinators had to create a pie and it has exactly one topic in it. So the way Alex works is it just like always wants you to do the damn pie, right? It's like, learn, do your topic, come on, like you haven't done the thing we want you to do. And if you don't learn that topic, it's not going to count against your grade. However, if you want that message to stop, it's like a topic on scientific notation, which is something that will be really important in unit 2. So if people really struggle in unit 2 with like understanding it, I'll be like, maybe we should go and visit that one topic we never did, right? But it's just a review topic. It's not, I can't see on one side of these guys. It's not really anything that's going to stop you from being successful in the class, okay? You would use my 2 features that I always use are I go to the little, it's called like, they call it the hamburger menu because it's like 3 lines, but you click the 3 lines and you go to learn. No, I'm sorry, that was my other class. You click the 3 lines and you go to assignments, or you click the 3 lines and you go to textbook for this class. And those are really the only 2 things that we really need to access there. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And all of those assignments, you should find that if they exist in Alex, there's also a due date in your Canvas calendar. So you can kind of feel like I've paced you so that you don't want to wait. If you can wait, I'm not going to decrease your grade, but it would be to your advantage to stay up to date with those due dates so we're not, too crazy busy at the end. Okay, great questions. Okay. As we're working through, if you guys have a question or anything like that, and I'm going to pull up my participant list. So if somebody unmutes, I can see that. Okay, that means that you're about to ask a question, but also if you like raise your hand, you'll pop to the top of the list. So that's why I have that there too. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about is that this is just for anybody who missed my first class. This is my unit 1 packet from the student packets. And we're going to work through this and kind of continue on where we left off each day. And if we don't finish, there'll be additional extra problems that you could practice on your own, because it might be that we don't finish every single thing in here. Okay. But on Tuesday, I'm just going to scroll so I can see a couple of these at the same time. We looked at number 1, and this is the one where I said, ooh, that was a little bit trickier than number 2. So I'm going to remind us that we were looking at parameters and statistics. And we said that parameters were values from, and I know we had a note here, the population. Remember, that was our note from parameters. And statistics, we said, that's what we study in this class. And otherwise the class would be called parameters, and it would be like really boring, right? Because it would just be like about everybody. But it's way more interesting when we go in and we look at little tiny groups, because every little tiny group is different. So that's why statistics is so interesting to people, because when I go into the sample, which is where the statistics come from, they start with the same letter. Statistics, sample, parameter, population. It makes it easier for my brain. Okay. So the statistics, they vary when we grab different samples from different places, right? And that's why it's so interesting to study it. But those are the values that come from the sample. And we said basically the population was the entire group, right? but the sample we said in our notes was just a subset. And this was where it was a little bit tricky in this wording, because it was like, if we don't explicitly know what the popular vote is, that was really tricky on Tuesday, right? So the popular vote is everybody. That's like, well, theoretically, that's everybody that goes out on election day and casts the vote. That's what our popular vote is, okay? So anytime you see this phrase, this is what I'm going to highlight for you guys, the word poll, and specifically this is a Gallup poll, but it's a poll. A poll is a survey, right? I can't poll the population, that's everybody, but I can grab a few people and give them a poll, which is a small survey. So I want that language to be kind of like a giveaway to us if we see it online on our homework or ever again, okay? And so just remind ourselves that our popular vote was the actual election results, right? Like that's the results that, and again, we just did this right in 2020. So those are the final results. But leading up to that, how many times did you like scroll on your phone or turn on the news or whatever and see a poll of like, Trump has this many votes for him and Biden has this, right? Like going up into the election, people were always polling to see what was going to happen. We wanted to know, we wanted to predict what was going to happen. So that's the smaller survey in terms of language, the survey, and that's from a sample, right? I can't survey every single individual. We would refer to that as a census if we were trying to approach every single individual. Okay, and then we said the two numbers that were parameters were the values that came from the popular vote. So my parameters were the 43.4 and the 42.7. And my statistics, which were drastically different for Humphrey, if anybody caught that, was 43% for Nixon and only 28% for Humphrey. So that's where we see that the sample really differs from the population itself. Right? My dog is like scratching at the door. Breakfast is, yeah, none of these dogs want to go outside. Like, I know you know what it's like outside right now, guys. Like this dog has no desire to go outside, but he will scratch at that door for the next 2 hours straight, insisting that that's really what he wants to do. If you open it, he'll just stand there and stare at you. I don't get him, but he's just going to annoy us the whole time. So I'm really sorry. I'm just going to let you guys know, because I'm going to tell him to stop like at least another 4 times. Okay, so our values from that popular vote are considered parameters because everybody had an impact in those. Our values are that our statistics were from a smaller subset. So we refer to those as statistics. Okay, so that's where I want your mind to go. So let's go to our next example, because our next example is just saying, and this is why I should have done it first, what's just the population versus the sample, right? Just tell me which are the two groups we care about. And I went a little too far with parameter and statistic, and that's my fault. So we're going to go back track. So we're going to read number 2 together. I'm going to read it with you. A vet wants to learn more about the proportion of overweight dogs at their practice. From their client list of over 6,000 dogs, the vet randomly selects 150 dogs and looks more closely into their records to establish how many are overweight. In this example, what is the population and what is the sample? So using what I just wrote, population is the entire group, right? So I want you guys to take a moment to read this back over. I'm just going to write out population and sample, and we're going to say entire group and the subset, right? So it's got to come from the group. You're missing a 0, but I'm into it, Mimi. You just dropped a 0. Okay, so their client list is over 6,000 dogs. So this vet could know over 6,000 dogs, right? Okay, that is the big overarching group from which they randomly selected. So I really like that there's two things going for us here in this example, which is why we should have done it first. There's numbers, right? There's a bigger number and a smaller number. Does everybody see that? 6,000 is bigger than 150. So if we have to pull a subset, then it's going to be the smaller group that we're looking at. Okay, so that is a little bit of a giveaway in this example that I like. But the other thing that I'm going for is, where did the dogs that we looked at come from, right? So even if we didn't know how many there were, we randomly selected 150 dogs to look more closely into their records. Well, they have to be dogs that this vet knows, right? So then we want to backtrack and figure out where they came from, their client list. Okay, so that's my overarching entire group. Excellent job in the chat. Are there any people who are thrown off or disagree? I'm going to say over, because it says over 6,000 dogs on the client list, right? We just want to be clear that these are dogs that do see this particular vet, right? We're not just like going out in the wild and choosing random dogs. They are dogs that we know. From the dogs we know, hopefully maybe you caught it, they were randomly, simple random sample, randomly selected from that population of 6,000. So another giveaway is that I have a sampling method in there right before the smaller number, right? So if I randomly select them, then that can't be the population. We just talked about random selection on Tuesday. Everyone is listed, and then we, without pattern, no prediction, we choose. But we need everyone listed out, okay? So after the words randomly select, that is a dead giveaway that my sample comes next. Okay, so that's another key in the language there that I'm talking about my sample next. And so that's my 150, and I'm going to say, I'll be specific, randomly selected dogs. And just to be clear, if we cared about a parameter or a statistic or something like that, what are we measuring for these dogs? It says they want to look closely into their records to establish how many are overweight. So what are we measuring? What would be the data that we're collecting? How could you tell if the dog is overweight? What would you have to know? We have to know the weight, right? And then I would guess like maybe the average weight of that breed, just to kind of make an establishment of whether it was overweight, right? Because just telling me, just for you guys, just to know, one of my dogs weighs 75 pounds and the other weighs 65 pounds. And you guys might be like, that's really big. And I'd be like, but they're both really freakishly skinny. They're just really big dogs, right? So, but the weight alone, right? We want to compare that as well with something like the average for that breed, right? So that we can get some sort of relative, is it overweight or underweight? But yes, we would have to know the weight. So we would be collecting like from their records, how much did the dog weigh? Absolutely. So numbers, good job. Okay. So it's like already exposed on the page and we can all see number 3 right here. So I would like to look at that together, and we can, the statistic is the one thing at the bottom of the screen, and I can just write it on the top right for part D. So we can do it all right here on this page and we can see it together. Mainly because we've got that population at the top with the definition and sample. And then we also know, based on what they're asking and saying, parameter versus statistic, well, we can use our part 1 for that too, right? Parameters from the population, statistics from the sample. So let's leave all our notes up and take a look at number 3. Before I move on to 3, are there any questions at all for number 2? One more time. we're gonna do population versus sample. I love the thumbs up, Nikki. Thank you so much. Okay. So the first thing it's asking is what's the population and what's the sample? We're going to dig into that. Then it's going to say from that, what's the parameter? What's the statistic? Okay. So it's going to be which is the big group, which is the small group again. So I'm going to read the question. If you have an answer, don't hit enter yet. Give your classmates a second. The first thing I'm going to ask is population. You can type it in the chat, but don't hit enter. Let's give our classmates a second to think too. Okay. At a large cell phone production company, every 15th phone is removed from the conveyor belt and sent through an inspection. By the end of one day, 250 phones are inspected and found to have an average battery life of 11.4 hours. The phone company advertises a battery life of 12 hours for the same device. Okay, take a moment. The first thing, actually, I'm going to go with the easier thing for most of our brains. It's actually usually easier to identify the sample than it is to identify the population from the wording. So I'm going to jump to part B. I want to know, and type it, don't hit enter. What group that's listed here, like something that's been discussed here, is my subset of the larger group? Where did we gather the information? Who are our subjects? In the previous example, it was the 150 randomly selected dogs. That's the only dogs we measured the weights for. So I'm wondering, like, which of the products did we look at? Okay, have we typed something into the chat? What is my sample? What do we think? Go ahead and hit enter. $250 phones selected. Edgar, do you mean that did you just write population first before I asked for the sample? Okay, all right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on what you were saying. Okay, I agree. The sample is the 250 phones. Nikki, yes, okay. 15th, every 15th phone. What's that? You're fine, Edgar, I understand. What's the 15th giving us? What did we learn last class that it was like every 15th phone? What's that called? Where they like pick a number and they skip everybody in between.
Systematic sampling.
Yes, Mimi. They picked a system. Yes, Edgar. They picked a system and they stuck to it. Okay. So this has a couple little like, ooh, can we name the sampling method too? Like things snuck in there, right? But what phones did we actually touch and research? That's what we want to know. And that's my sample. So if I chose every 15, at the end of the day, there were 250 phones that were inspected. We'll say pulled off the belt. So as the phones go by, I'm assuming thousands, maybe millions. I don't know. I've never been to a phone production company, but I'm assuming lots of phones are going by us and we're just kind of like grabbing, grabbing every 15th, right? Until we get 250 and then we go and we analyze them. We figure out how long did these phones work. Okay, here's where I want your brain to go. If I chose 250 phones as my sample, where did it come from? What's the large group? That would be my population. What could we possibly envision as the population if my sample is 250 of the phones? What would be the large group? Does anybody have a guess for me? Any idea what we were thinking? All phones from that cell phone production company. Customers. Oh, okay. I want us to be careful. I think, Alyssa, your mind is going to the population has to be people, right? Where it's like, it has to be a person, right? But I want us to think that it doesn't have to be people in the population. Nikki, did you have something to say?
Yes, I think we'll have to multiply the 250 times the 15th.
Oh, is that where you guys are getting the population? Okay, I love that you all want a number so badly. I don't need a number for how big the population is. I love that you're like, I have to figure out how many phones they made, right? I can just imagine, right, that if I looked at 250 phones in my sample, that my population had to be much larger than that, right? So 250 is quite large. So I don't disagree. I want to say it was Benica was how I was supposed to pronounce your name based on what you wrote in your notes. Tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I love the math. Am I wrong?
Benika.
Benica. Man, okay. So close. Thank you, Benica. You tried really hard for me too. You were like, this is how you pronounce my name. Okay. I love the math that you did. You did the 250 times the 15, right? To figure out how many total phones there would have been like during that day. I love that. The only reason we can't guarantee that's the number is because the one thing that it said in systematic sampling was that we started at a random phone, right? And we don't know how many phones there were before we started. And that's the only reason we can't claim that. But I love the math that you did to figure that out. All of you are like, I have to have a number. And I love that because it's a math class. I'm going to argue I don't need a number. I have no idea how many phones this company produces, but we went on only one day, right? So they produce many in a week, right? We just showed up on one day to sample from that particular day. So I'm going to go with, I see all phones from that cell phone production company. I don't disagree. I like Ashley, all phones produced in one day, right? Because we showed up on that singular day. I understand why you would want to say that. I would argue though that we sampled on one day, but the same phones are going to be produced daily, right? So I don't think tomorrow is going to change from today in terms of the production, but I like where you're going with that. I think it's all phones from that cell phone production company. So I wrote in like all phones produced by the company. And I'm specifically not naming the company to start a war on people's preferences in phones in our chat or something like that. So okay, so here's the deal. I'm going to actually draw a line and say that whatever number comes from all phones produced by the company is going to be called our parameter, which would be part C. And whatever number comes from the 250 phones we pulled off the belt has to be our statistic. I want you to draw a direct connection between those two. I pulled the 250 off the belt. What number came from those phones? Which value in the paragraph came from the 250 phones that we actually touched that day? Yes, Kate, you caught it. I'm going to read the sentence. By the end of day one, 250 phones are inspected and found to have an average battery life of 11.4 hours. So this, I'll highlight that sentence right there. That is discussing only the sample in that entire sentence. So whatever value is associated with those 250 phones is my statistic. Excellent job. So let me get out of my highlighter mode. It's 11.4 hours. That was our statistic, because that came from the phones we physically inspected. I think parameter in this type of example is a little bit harder, but the parameter would be a number somewhere in this paragraph that's referring to all phones produced by the company. And I want you to think, yes, Edgar, you've got it. I want you to think that, look at our first example. The parameters were percentages and so were the statistics, right? It was the same information we were getting from both groups. It was just this set was from everyone and this set was from a smaller group. So I like that Edgar was like, where are the other hours? Where are the other hours in the paragraph, right? Because if we know we gathered hours of operation from our sample, then we also will be looking at hours of operation from our population. And so in this last sentence where they say they advertise 12 hours for the same device, that is them saying, well, we tested them all and they last for 12 hours, right? That's like in the fine print on your like cell phone commercial, right? We know this phone is going to last this long because we tested it a lot, right? So this is our all phones are advertised for 12 hours. So what was the easier for us to identify? The sample itself, right? Then we can kind of backtrack. If the sample is this, where would it have had to come from, right? Because it has to be a larger version of the same type of group. Small group of cell phones, big group of cell phones, right? Small group of dogs, big group of dogs. Small group of people who plan to vote, big group of people who vote. Okay, so every time it's the same people that we're talking to, the same dogs, the same cell phones. Okay, that's what I want you to keep in mind. They're not like two separate groups. How do we feel? Not too bad, right? Parameter, statistic, they have the right letter, something in your brain. I want to click for that. Okay. The next thing we have to do though is the part where Mimi piped up and was like systematic, and I was like, yes. And then earlier we were like randomly selects, and we were like simple random sample, right? Now we got to go back to those, all the sampling methods, and we want to figure out if we can differentiate based on a scenario that's provided. Okay, so the sampling methods that we saw last class, I will kind of write in a line at the top of the page to give us like a bank, a word bank, you know, because we haven't defined them again today. But I do want you to have those little notes we took on Monday. We did not see each other Monday. On Tuesday, next to you, so that we can look at these examples on the next page. Okay. So I'm saving this and I'm going to scroll to the next page so that we can see some of those examples using little scenarios, so a little sentence or two. Okay. Don't get scared. I have to clear it. My coworkers have a really cool way of sharing and saving on their iPads, but they have to stream through their iPad to do it. And I've not successfully been able to do that without technological issues in a class. And so that's why I clear and scroll and take pictures. So I'm sorry if that's a pain in the butt. Okay, so identify the type of sampling used. Right above that, I'll give us a little word bank, right? We said that we could have a census. We also said that we could have a voluntary response sample. We said I'm going to write SRS for a simple random sample. I went out of order. Sorry. Convenience was the one that we had listed right under voluntary, I think. Systematic was the one that we just looked at. That was where we pick our number and we don't deviate from that system. And then we also saw stratified. And we saw cluster. Okay, and just a reminder from our notes, stratified and cluster were the ones where there were groups first, right? Okay, so remember, stratified was like, yes, there are groups, but I actually go to every single group. That's stratified. Cluster, there are groups, but I survey the whole group. I don't see all the groups. I just take one group and I look at them, or two groups, okay? But I look at the whole group at once. So that's what we're trying to figure out, if we can tell there are groups. So let's do this. Number 4, letter A, we're going to try this together. And I'm going to like underline and circle and whatever we need to figure out what the keywords are that are helping me. Okay. To conduct a study on memory loss among the elderly in Howard County. All patients over 65 years old in 2 randomly selected nursing homes in Howard County were tested. Oh, well, there's like 2 things. So I read like 2 things. It was first, all patients over 65 years old. They chose them all. But then they were like really specific. Well, actually, it was all of them in 2 randomly selected nursing homes. Okay, so real quick, did we actually interview all patients over 65 in all of Howard County? Yes or no? Did we interview them? No, no. We did not talk to all of them, not every single adult over 65. So that can't be a census, even though the words are there that says all patients over 65, because we didn't go to every nursing home. So what are the 2 randomly selected nursing homes supposed to be? We go to 2 nursing homes and we survey everyone in both of them. Are there more than 2? Ooh, Tiffany. Ooh, I like it. I was gonna say, are there more than 2 nursing homes in Howard County? I would guess so. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing because I think there's just 2 within like a 10-minute walk from my house. Okay, so I would guess yes. All right, so let's think here. A couple things. So these are 2 groups out of, oh, I accidentally just zoomed in on my iPad, out of many. So let's just start there. Then I've got Tiffany and Vanika saying these are clusters, because not only are they 2 groups, but we went into the groups and we grabbed the entire group, right? So I took 2 groups and this says I survey all people in both groups. So I did find 2 clusters and I surveyed them both. So I agree with you both. This is meant to describe a cluster sample where I grabbed 2 and then surveyed every single person within them. Good job. You're over here on my screen. So you're actually right on top of one another. So nice job. Any questions? Anybody think differently when we read this? Like something you want to ask a question about in the wording? Okay. All right, let's see. Let's see if we keep moving on. Let's read this next one. Part B. To maintain quality control in a bottling company, every 24th bottle coming off the production line is tested for an airtight seal. This sounds eerily familiar to me. 24th bottle. Yes, this is our same language Kate is recognizing, same with Edgar. This is just like the cell phone, right? When we talked about the cell phone production company and they were like, we're going to choose every 15th phone off the production line, we said that was systematic. This is the same. You want to say hi? You want to say bye? My nephew. There was no school on Thursday, so you know you don't get to experience this. Have a good day. Bye-bye. All right. Okay, so every 24th bottle coming off of the production line is the same as choosing every 15th phone. It's the same in our little picture that we drew as choosing every 3rd person, right? I pick a system or a number and I don't deviate from it until I'm done sampling. And that removes some of my internal bias. Like, oh, I'm not going to select that bottle. It's too close to that. Like, whatever, right? I just choose every 24th one and there's no bias. Okay. So this is, oops, I'm still on my highlighter. This is my system, right? Like the number that I'm going to skip every time in between is the system that I stick to. So it's systematic. Good. Okay, so a value, a numeric value kind of needs to be there for this to be systematic. That's one little giveaway, right? We have to know what we're skipping and what we're choosing, really, okay? Okay, let's try again. Good job. A CEO of a small company is interested in learning how their employees feel about their healthcare options. They speak with each of their 26 employees in order to gain more information. So it's a small company. And so we say it's a small company and they speak with each of their 26 employees. What does that language mean? Each of their 26 employees. Who did they speak to?
Oh.
Do you hear my wife? Answering questions for the class? Really?
I'm sorry.
I said, who did they speak? All of them. Like she's just answering. Yes, they spoke to all of them. Sorry, Ashley, she took your thunder.
Sorry, I take stats every Tuesday and Thursday.
She said she takes intro stats every Tuesday and Thursday.
Just
rude.
Teach from the living room.
Okay, so yes, so everyone, all of the employees are actually the ones who are answering the questions, right? Yes, each of, this is everyone in the population. So I agree with my 3 answers here, and I'm assuming what Ashley was going to try to help me out with, which is census. Okay, yes, all of them did try to, or were surveyed and answered the question. Well, I assume if my boss asks me a question, I'm going to answer it. I probably feel pretty required to answer it if it's my boss. Okay, good. We surveyed every single person, and I hope that that was clear from the wording. If it's going to be a census, the wording has to try to indicate every single person available was questioned. Okay, let's try again. A publishing company owns 4 different fashion magazines, each catering to a different type of shopper. To judge the appeal of a new clothing line, a random sample of 50 people, so it's a random sample, but it's of 50 people from each of the 4 different subscriber lists. That's a lot of words. Let's try to figure out what that just said. A random sample of 50 people. Okay, so they're telling me that they randomly selected people, but this is people chosen from 4 different groups. So I chose people, but each of the groups came from one of the different fashion magazines. Okay, so I chose people from 4 different groups. And then at the end of the day, I had 200 people total selected. All right. So I see some, Benika, you put a question mark on every single one of these, and every single one of them has been right. So get the question mark away, say it with confidence. Come on. Okay. A publishing company has 4 different magazines. Right away, guys, I want you to think these are my groups, right? Like almost like the first one, that's 4 groups. Just like the first one, they were like nursing homes in Howard County. That's a bunch of groups, and we chose 2. Well, here they only have 4. And then it says, then they go into each of the 4. So they didn't pick a group and survey the whole group. They decided they were going to go visit every group and take something from each. So yes, stratified, yes to my people who said stratified. I showed up at each group and I picked some from each. That is the definition of stratified. Excellent. The word random, I do not want you to get thrown off by, to say, oh my God, the word random is in there. It has to be a simple random sample, right? Remember that when we looked at that picture of the stratified, we said there was no way to predict who was chosen. In the first group, it was like the first and the last, and then it was like the 4th and the 5th, and then it was like the 2nd and the 5th. Like it wasn't a pattern to who was chosen. So that's why the inclusion of the random selection is also in there. That does not mean it's not stratified. Okay, so please be careful with that. The more important feature is that we showed up at every group, right? Not necessarily that we randomly selected from them. Okay, it's that we really showed up at each one. You guys are crushing it. Okay, let's do E and then I'll like scroll up and we can see the end of the page. To conduct a satisfaction study for the local bus service, a transportation employee who rides the bus to work each day asked 15 other riders to complete a survey on her ride to work. Okay, so I showed up on the bus and I was like, oh my God, hey, can you answer this? So I showed up and I just asked the people, the 15 people on the bus with me. I'm going back to my original guesses up here because I want to talk about the fact that, Kate, I am volunteering my answer. That's not wrong, right? It's not like you're forcing me to answer a question, but if something is going to be voluntary in terms of a survey, I want you to think that every damn bus rider would have had to see the survey. And those 15 chose to respond. That's not what this person did though, right? They were like, ooh, how can I get 15 answers? Every day when I get on the bus, there's at least 15 people there. I got this, right? And they just sent their survey around the bus and got 15 answers. So it is considered convenience. Benika, be careful because nothing in here indicates that technology was used, right? And so if you want to use the idea of like simple random, it would have to be like, and I used a random number generator to select the bus participants to speak to that morning. And that this person was literally like, hey, you're close by. Can you answer this for me? Right? So that's convenience. Okay. Okay. So let's try to figure out in the wording how we would indicate that if we saw something similar. They asked 15 other riders, right? So there's no, let's call it a plan. Right? It's not like they reached out to everybody and invited responses, right? So there's no plan. We asked only those nearby. And remember we said it doesn't, I don't remember if it was, am I spelling this right? Convenience. I think so. I can't remember if it was this class or my next class where somebody said, does a convenient sample have to be in person? I think it was this class, I don't know. And I was like, no, you could totally ask a convenient sample as like a Twitter poll and just take the first 20 responses. You know what I mean? Like from your follower, like that's just people who are nearby, right? That's easy. And you're not really inviting a large group to respond. Okay. So voluntary, I totally get that convenience and voluntary are really easily confused because everybody volunteers an answer to a question. I want to make sure that it's clear. If it's voluntary, a big group gets the questions and then they choose to file in answers. Okay, it's like a choice. Okay, any questions on the ones we've gone over so far? Because you guys, from the answers that I've gotten and the feedback that I see, we're doing very well. Not everybody has spoken, so I want to make sure that there aren't any questions that I'm not hearing. Okay, a few more. I saved this page, so I'm going to clear it and scroll up so we can see the bottom of the page. Is that okay? Can I get a thumbs up that everybody wrote these down so far? We're okay? All right, I don't want to scroll if we're not ready. Okay, awesome. All right. So we're going to get to go through these last couple, and then we're going to go into what was in the videos for today, which is like quantitative versus qualitative in the next little piece. Okay. So I know vocab is just like, ugh, but at least qualitative and quantitative, we can get a little more fun with that than Jacinta. Oh no, I went too fast. Okay. I saved the picture, Jacinta. I can send it to you. Okay. So don't worry. If you didn't copy it down, I will send you that photo that I just took of that page. I did not see your X. I apologize. I went too quickly. That's my fault. Okay. So the the next few here, okay, we just got 5 more. We want to read through. If there are groups, we want to identify that, right? If there's a key word that you're thinking, this is how I know what's going on, I want to know that too, so we can help our classmates who might not be feeling as confident about it, okay? So in part F, a man inherits a house full of possessions from a relative. The house contains many Chinese bowls, paintings, and old books. He's interested in getting a sense of what the possessions might be worth. So he picks a few bowls, a few paintings, and a few books to bring with him to show an appraiser. Okay, so he's in this house and there's bowls, paintings, and old books. Then he goes, I don't know how much any of this is worth. So I take a few bowls, a few paintings, and a few books. We want to be careful with saying something is a simple random sample, Edgar, because if it was simple random sample, they would have to use a random number generator or technology to have selected from the groups. Okay. And I just gave something away where I just said groups, but when it says the house contains bowls, paintings, and old books, and it specifically notes 3 different things, then it tells me I go and I choose some of the first, some of the second, some of the third. It is telling me I went to all 3 groups. So let me highlight 2 separate things. This is the first part where I see 3 very separate things. And then they tell me again, I do the bowls, the paintings, and the books. So I show up to all 3 of those groups. So the first indicator that there are groups would be right here. There are 3 groups, and this is some from each group, right? So I have 3 groups, and then I show up at each one of them to take a couple things to experiment with. I agree with the stratified. I went to each one of those groups and I took a little bit from each. The only thing missing from this one is like the idea that it was randomly selected, right? That part is not clearly stated here. You understand that Edgar, for the, yeah. SRS is hard because it's hard for me as a teacher to write an example of it because it's very limited. I have to number everybody and choose using technology, right? So it's very boring and it's less exciting than, you know, going to each group and choosing a little bit, right? And there's going to be less to say usually for a simple random sample. Okay. All right, let's try G. I know there is one in here, Edgar, so don't get discouraged like there's no SRS in here. We just haven't seen it yet. Your coworker is interested in changing primary care physicians. She asks you and your fellow coworkers for their opinions on doctors in the area. So she's like, I need a new doctor. Here's some people that I trust. I'm going to ask them. She asks you and your fellow coworkers. Did she like try? Right. Like I'm feeling everybody in here. Get rid of those question marks, Mika. Yes. Hello, Ashley's child. Okay. I got to wave at kids in the screen. All right. Hello, hello. Okay. Yes, I don't have a pattern. It's not like I decided I'd choose every 6th coworker and ask them, right? I kind of turned around and went, well, I know you guys and you guys like your doctors, so I'll ask you, right? So it is absolutely convenience. I absolutely agree with you. So I, fellow coworkers, right? Ask only those nearby, right? And I also want to emphasize there's no planning. I just showed up to work and asked some people what they think, right? I didn't plan and write a survey and give it to everybody and elicit opinions. I just like ask a question. Typically that's convenience, okay? Okay. A list of student wow. I can't read this, and it's probably because of the way it's written. A list of students, student IDs, there we go, are randomly generated. And those students with matching ID numbers receive a survey from the college. That is the language. Yes, I see you guys. You're like, oh, now I get what she means, right? There is technology there. And I want like at least a thumbs up from you, Edgar, to see if you agree with this wording, right? Because that's where we were talking earlier. But we have students, student IDs are randomly generated. And then if they match, we contact you. So we generate some random numbers, we find the matching numbers on the list, and we survey only those people. This is the definition of a simple random sample, okay? Because the technology is required to be used to make that selection. It requires typically a computer, right? A very smart piece of technology. Okay. Good job. This is, what do I want to highlight? Randomly generated, right? And the matching ID number. So this is the choosing the sample, but this is using technology, right? We have to use the technology to be able to do that. Great. And I saw a bunch of people type it as I was reading it. So I know that some of that wording was like a dead giveaway for us. Okay. All right. 2 more. After making an online purchase, customers are asked to follow a link and take a survey about their experience with the website. So after making a purchase, customers are asked to follow a link. So it's not like only some customers, right? So first I am going to highlight this one. Customers are asked to follow a link. That is implying all customers get the link. Do you agree? Everyone gets the link. This is like when you go to the store and they give you your receipt and they're like, take my survey, right? Tell me I'm great, right? You'll get 5% off next time or something, something like that. They try to give you an incentive. All right. So yes, customers are asked to follow a link and then take a survey about their experience. So all customers get the link. They choose to respond. So I am so proud of you all in my chat. Yes, they are voluntarily clicking that link and eliciting a response or offering a response. Okay. So that is on them. That is absolutely right. This would be considered voluntary. This would be like having a QR code at the bottom of your receipt or something like that, very similar to that, where it would be a choice. Good job. Final one. All Math 138 students are required to take the final exam to assess their mastery of the course content areas. The results from these exams are investigated to explore areas that may need further attention in subsequent semesters. Okay, so I see you guys, there's very little information except right here, right? The only part of any of this wording that talks about who is doing this is the first 3 words, the first 4 words. And if I talk to everyone, yes, my chat, if everyone does it in the entire population, then it's a census. So the things that would apply as a census for this class would be the unit 1, 2, 3 exam and the final, because everyone takes them and they're an analysis of where you are at that time. Good job. Yes, everyone. So this is, I'm going to put an arrow like this, the entire population. So yes, this is a census. You guys did an excellent job. I find this, and you'll see that, like, why did she spend so much time on this? Because I find this to be the most challenging piece of information in chapter 1 is the sampling methods. I think it's much more straightforward for us to identify something as qualitative or quantitative and discuss that than it is for us to pick apart the English language words that are in each one of these sentences. And I am well aware that I have students for which English is not their first language. And so those are the types of questions that I really want people to ask me if there's something in here that just, whoa, I have no idea how you got that based on that language. That's what I want to hear as well, because I know that that can be a struggle. I have kind of associated statistics tests with like a little bit of an English test at the same time, right? You've also got to interpret the words to be able to do the problem. And so I want to make sure that we're feeling okay. So any questions at all about the last 5 that we just did? I did just save it for us so that we won't lose any of that information. But did anybody get thrown off or have any questions about these examples before we go to something different? You crushed it.
I have a question,
Sure.
but it's a little bit, am I allowed to reference a question from the Alex?
Yeah.
Is that, I don't know if it's prohibited.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one thing that threw me off on one of them that it referenced like moms of football players were surveyed. And I know that part of what makes sometimes word problems get confusing because there's like so many different little factors that you kind of can start harping on the wrong thing. But I guess when I was hearing like moms of football players, that made me wonder, like, could that be the is that considered the population? Because automatically I feel like that's a subset. Like there's more, I guess what I'm wondering is when you're in the beginning of a question and a specialization is said about a person or a group, how do you know whether to harp on whether that's the population or subset? Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. So I think I can kind of answer it by saying, to go further into the problem, and I don't have this problem pulled up in front of me, Ashley, so that's a little bit more challenging, but we can absolutely do that at some point if you want to. If I'm thinking they start talking about moms of football players, right? And then they keep on going, and then they're like, so-and-so, and 56% of them live with their sons, right? Like, whoa, right? And that information is about the moms, correct? So that would indicate to me that the sample and or population is the moms themselves, right? Whereas if they go on to say moms of football players were surveyed, and then compared to other moms, right? Regular moms or whatever that's supposed to mean, then we're looking at all moms everywhere. That's a little bit hard for me to say without knowing exactly how specific that question was getting. But is that where you're going with that? How do I want to focus my thinking?
Yeah, definitely. Because I guess I'm thinking like if we're talking about moms of football players are surveyed, then I guess I'm wondering like, how do we know we're not talking about a larger group? But I guess that just answered it for me.
Okay, and specifically, I'm going to go, I can go in after my classes today and take a look at that wording from this section and see if I can highlight where the confusion would have been. It can certainly be just in the wording of the question, like that one particular question was poorly worded or something like that. And I can always try to give that information to the whole class. Okay, because if you saw it and got confused, there's somebody else did. You know what I mean? So I want to make sure that we're all clear when we see it in the future. Great question though. And I want to, Alex questions are absolutely fair game during class. Okay. Especially if you're like, she said it different than Alex said it. I want to clarify like why, or if they're the same thing, if we're both saying the same thing in just a different way. Okay. Great question. Okay. I would love to get into, this is actually next problem. I added it in the packet based on our old textbook because I really like the idea of discussing who the subjects in the paragraph are and what was researched, when we conducted the research, where it was done, how, that's like my sampling method and how we surveyed, and then why we would have done it. Because even back in the previous examples, the Hubert Humphrey Nixon, the dogs and being overweight, or the phones and the hours they operate, we could have done all of this for each of those, right? The subject is the phones. What are the variables? How long they operate? When did we do it? I have no idea. Where did we do it? I have no idea. How did we do it? We systematically sampled. Why did we do it? Because we wanted to see how long the phones would last. Right? I could break down any little bitty research study that we're given to try to gain more information about it. This particular example has variables, AKA information we wrote down from the research, just buried all through it, okay? And specifically addressing one of the concerns I had earlier, the subjects, they are not people, because a lot of the times our brain believes that the subjects must be human beings, right? And the only thing information can come from is humans, which is not the case, okay? So let's read carefully to try to figure out how we could break this down. Do I expect for you to list out the who, what, when, where, how, and why of every study? I actually do not. Do I expect when this is done, you could list the what or the variables with absolute ease? Yes. We're going to pick out where does the what really begin, and that other information, how is it helping me really understand what's going on? Okay. And then if you kind of are a scanner of what we're going to do ahead, part B says, now what's qualitative and quantitative? And that's when our video from like this going into this morning comes into play, because now we're going to be like, what's a number with units, and what is something that I can't describe that way? Okay. And so we're going to break this up using what we learned from the video, qualitative versus quantitative. So let's start just by reading the paragraph together, and then we'll talk about what we can see in it. It says in June 20, it's a really old report, so I'm really sorry about that. But in June 2012, Consumer Reports published an article on some sport utility vehicles they had tested recently. They reported basic information about each of the vehicles and the results of some tests conducted by their staff. Among other things, the article told the brand of each vehicle, its price, and whether it had a standard or automatic transmission. They reported the vehicle's fuel economy in miles per gallon, its acceleration or number of seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour, and its braking distance to stop from 60 miles per hour. The article also rated each vehicle's reliability as much better than average, average, worse, or much worse than average. I know we've all had to answer one of those questions, okay? Where you have to fill out somewhere on that spectrum, okay? All right, well, that was a lot of information. Buried in there were several lists, okay? I want to focus on those lists in just a moment, but think about all the information that was written down, right? There's like several lists and it's all about something in particular. Is it about a particular group of people, a particular group of vehicles? Who are we researching here? Who are the subjects in this particular case? Where did we gather all of that information from? The brand, the price, the transmission, all that. Where did it come from? What group? Yes, Kate, we only focused on SUVs, sport utility vehicles. No sedans, no trucks, no minivans, no, why would you do an 18-wheeler, but whatever, no other anything, just SUVs, okay? So our focus excludes a lot of vehicles, right? So I want to make sure it's clear that we're specifically targeting, right? I'm going to abbreviate because I'm really into abbreviations, SUVs. It doesn't even say how many of them we targeted. So we don't even know how big our sample is. We do, however, know the information that we recorded. I see you too, Nikki. I didn't see it soon enough, but thank you. I see it in the chat. So I am going to tell you my giveaway. When I'm reading one of these paragraphs and they start listing things, those are variables that I recorded. So I'm going to go through and grab my highlighter and say, like, it says the article told the brand of each vehicle, its price, whether it had standard or automatic transmission. So that's 3 things that we would have written down. And then it keeps going. They reported the vehicle's fuel economy, acceleration, and braking distance. And then one more. The article also rated each vehicle's reliability. So 3 sentences of kind of like running information that we gathered about the vehicles or our subjects, all of that are considered our variables, some of which are qualitative and some of which are quantitative, based on what information we really cared about grabbing. So I want us to make a running list, and I've already helped to highlight all of them from the list. So we're going to make sure we write there's 7 of them. We're going to make sure we write all 7 of them under what? Then it's going to be up to us as a group to try to later in part B, figure out if it's quantitative or qualitative based on what we know. Okay. So right now we're just going to list them, and then we'll do the qualitative, quantitative in just a moment. I'm going to go in order because why not? They said the brand, the price. I'm just going to write the transmission, right? Because that would be standard or automatic. Then it says fuel economy, acceleration, braking distance, and reliability. Okay. Looking at that list of information, and some of us maybe we have never gone out and looked for our own car, so we don't really care or understand some of this information. Some of us have purchased a car before and we know how important some of these things might be to us, right? Why would this information be important? I'm jumping all the way to the why. Like, who cares about the brand, price, transmission, fuel economy, acceleration, braking distance, and reliability of SUVs? What would someone do with this information? Why would you want all of this information? Just Hipsa, why would you want it all?
To know the condition of the car and what works and what doesn't work.
Yes, exactly. I want to, and the language Azaria just used in the chat is also beautiful. Hipsa says to learn about the condition, but then also using that information to help make an informed decision, right? Like, if I now know all this information about the condition, right, Hipsa, I'm not going to purchase it, right? I might go elsewhere, right? And so I do want to use this information to then make a decision of likely purchasing a car back in 2012. Yes. Okay. Very good. Okay. So we would use the information to decide the condition and make an informed decision. I find that once I know what information I gathered, it's almost a little easier for me to try to figure out why I would care about it, right? Give me a list of things, and then it might be easier for me to kind of relate them together. Why would someone care about all of this information at the same time? Okay, and most likely, just like we're saying, we're going to make a purchase, or we're considering making a purchase, and we would like to have as much information as possible about these different vehicles. Excellent job. Does it say when the research happened? Because when, where, and how are kind of like not, we haven't gotten there yet, right? Does it say when? Yeah, it says that in June 2012, the consumer reports were published, right? So the one thing, it says, when was the research conducted? The only thing we really know is that it had to be before it got published, right? So I'm just going to say before June 2012, because that's all we know. But also that's very limiting, right? Because this is a long time ago. So all cars produced after June 2012 are excluded. Like, this does actually help us, right? Because we can exclude a lot of potentials and say this had to have occurred before this particular date. Ooh, is there a where? I have HIPSA, yeah.
For the when, so do we
Yes.
have to write before and after, whatever the date is and everything? Like typically
So-
on a problem like this?
So the issue here, right, is that this is when this article was published, right? This is basically when the information became available. So the only reason I say before is that I couldn't have published it and done the research and gathered it all likely right in the same moment, right? So that's why I just said, yes, before it was published, we gathered it. I would always say it happened before whatever the date is that's given, unless it literally tells you, if so, we researched from 1957 to 1968. And I would be like, it happened from 1957 to 1968, right? But it does not explicitly say that. So yes, I do want to include the before. It is a really good question though, because that's like weirdly specific. Could you say, Chris, could you say that the Consumer Reports is where, or does it have to be a physical geographic location? Yeah, Chris, the where is typically a geographic location. And so because the information was published, right, in a report, doesn't mean that research was also done in that same location, right? So yeah, we would have to say, just like Edgar is suggesting, that the location is unknown because Consumer Reports is just the publication where it was written. Okay, that's a really good clarification too, Chris, that it does need to be a physical location. And one of my favorite things that you guys think is like your least favorite is that finally you can be like, I don't know the answer. What, in math? No way. Yeah, I don't know. And that's right. Like, I don't know where this took place, and don't make me guess, because guessing makes me a liar. Right? So I'm just going to say I don't know. I'm not going to make a guess and be incorrect. Okay? I would say, just in case we were aware, Consumer Reports, that's an American publication. SUVs, we are the only people who buy them. So like, we're the only country who buys SUVs, I'm just saying. So this is very much likely in the United States, but we don't know. It is not explicitly stated, and therefore we cannot say. Okay, I can assume all day, but you know what they say about assuming. So we want to make sure, that we keep that to the low. How? It's not like, okay, remember in the previous one, they chose every 15th phone and we were like, how? They systematically sampled, right? Or how did we choose the dogs from the vet? We randomly chose them. This is a little bit trickier because it doesn't say how we sampled them. It's like, how was the research conducted? I agree, Kate, those are my researchers, Consumer Reports, right? And then I would go in and it's like, they published the article, yes, but the question is, how did we gather the brand, the price, the transmission, the fuel economy? How did we get the what, right? Edgar, not where did it go, but how did we gather it? And so at some point, it's not very clear in this particular question, but it literally says up here, they tested them recently, right? Results of some tests conducted by their staff. Yes, it says a couple times in here that the only thing that they did was test the vehicles, right? And write some stuff down. So we would say tests conducted by the research staff. So we don't really have a lot of information, but we'll write what we know. And we certainly can't include that it's random or whatever, right? Because we don't know any of that and how that was selected. But excellent job, because sometimes we get a ton of information from an article and sometimes we're left with a few unknowns. Okay. And that's what I wanted to make clear, is that we don't necessarily have to know everything to really know the big picture why of what the point was. Okay, guys, great job. I want to go into the qualitative versus quantitative because this is insanely similar to the first question on your first take-home quiz. which gives you a paragraph for a research study and says, list the variables and tell me if they're quantitative or qualitative. So it's your job. It doesn't say, give me the who, what, when, where, why, how, right? It doesn't say all that. It just says, find the what, the variables, and then tell me if they're qualitative or quantitative. So guys, we found our variables. We know them. They're in part 2 or part A, part 2, whatever that's supposed to be, this right here. These are what we're going to use for part B. Part B says, list the variables. Indicate whether each variable was qualitative or quantitative. If it's quantitative, list possible units of measure. Okay. Whoa. Weird. Units of measure. All right. Okay. Let's start with, whoops, I should spell it right. Qualitative. I'm going to abbreviate. Qual, going to be on the left. I'm going to put a line. And we're going to have quan. So qualitative on the left, quantitative on the right. It is much easier for us to identify the definition for something quantitative, right? Quantitative, those are numbers with units. If it doesn't have measurement units, it is not quantitative. Okay? If I can't put units on it, then I can't call it quantitative. And so if we make a mistake and we say something is quantitative, sometimes my follow-up question is, then what would the units be, right? Because if I can't figure it out, then maybe I want to change my final answer, right? Oh, maybe it is qualitative and not quantitative. All right. So qualitative, this is a much harder definition, right? But qualitative, these are defining categories. So there are different categories for something to fall into. A great example of qualitative information would be like on your driver's license, your like hair color, eye color information is on there, right? Like identifiable information that's a color. I'm very boring, brown eyes, brown hair. So it's just a brr, brr, right, on my driver's license or whatever. But then there's like, you know, other identifiable features for other people, blue eyes, right? Or something like that. Your eyes are green, right? There's different choices, different categories that we could all fall into. That would be more like qualitative. So I like to say that these defines categories. Ooh, I have something in the chat. Qualitative, standard argument. Ooh, you're giving me some, Edgar. Okay, I'm going to go in a different order. Don't give me those answers that way. I'm going to say a variable, and I want everyone to tell me if it's qual or quan in the chat. Instead of naming variables, I want you all to try, because it's going to be your goal to try it on your homework. Okay, so let's try a variable like brand, the brand of the car. Go in my chat right now. Would that be considered qualitative, or quantitative? The brand of the car. Brand like a Toyota, Honda. Oh my God, those are the two cars that I own. That's rude. Japanese is like clearly where I'm going with that. Ford, Chevy, blah, 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 right? Yes, qualitative. It defines categories. I could say everyone with a Toyota, lump yourself over here. Everyone with a Chevy goes over there, right? Like, and I could group them by that value. I totally agree. So we're going to add brand, and I'm actually going to go up here and cross it out to make sure that I don't do something twice. Okay. Okay. Second variable is price. Price. Do we consider that to be quantitative, quan, or qualitative, qual? Quan or qual? Price. Okay. A number with units, we're saying. I don't disagree. And now it says though, guys, if the variable is quantitative, list possible units of measure. So if it's an SUV that you're buying in the United States, what would the price be in terms of units of measure? What would be the symbol, the units? The USD. Yes, the US dollar. Good. Okay, excellent. It's an SUV being purchased in the United States. Good job. So we would put price and we would put dollars or USD, right? If we're more familiar with that, the difference between, right? But we have like our monetary system versus every other country's monetary system. Okay. Just like our measurement system versus every other country's measurement system. Ooh, let me cross it out. All right, we're down to transmission. If I'm at transmission, which they said was whether it had standard or automatic, what would you call that? Qual or quan for transmission? Good. It's almost like a checkbox, right? Like, which one are you, automatic or standard, right? Do you have a stick shift or not, kind of thing? Okay. So yes, I agree with you. This would also be considered qualitative. I'm going to stick that. Good job, guys. You guys are crushing it. I'm going to stick it next to brand, just so because I write really big, I want to make sure I have space for everything. I'm going to make my list kind of in a row as opposed to a column. Okay, so we had to choose automatic or standard, which was like a category for each. So that was a little bit more straightforward. So what's going on, and this might be a little bit tricky for some of us, but I want to just read this. It says when they reported the vehicle's fuel economy, it was in miles per gallon. So using that information, would that be considered quantitative or qualitative? Miles per gallon and fuel economy, quantitative or qualitative? And if you're not sure based on the scenario and maybe less experience with the car buying, you can just throw in a question mark if you really are like, I don't know. But for fuel economy, they're trying to help with what's in parentheses. I don't know if it helps everybody. Okay, good. I agree with you. This would be considered a quantitative variable. And I'm going to stick this underneath so I have room to write the units. But the units are the miles per gallon. So be how many miles does this car go for each gallon of gas in the car? And this is a reported number on most cars these days, but for both city and highway. Okay, what about, there's like a lot of words after acceleration. So it says acceleration, number of seconds to go from 0 to 60. Okay, is that considered quantitative or qualitative? Acceleration, number of seconds to go from 0 to 60. Okay, what was it? Yeah, good. I see you guys. I agree that it's quantitative and I'm going to stick it over there, but what are the units? It says acceleration, number of what? Yeah, it's not, it's got several things in there, right? It says number of seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour. So the number that we are actually recording is this, the number of seconds. Yeah, it's going to be like, right, it's like meters per second, or probably in this case, miles per second. But yes, absolutely. If that's what the capital M is, Lakira, I like it. Okay. But yes, I agree with you. This is going to be measured based on what they've noted in seconds, which is weird because acceleration is something per second or per minute, right? But what they're saying is how quickly can it accelerate, right? How many seconds until it goes 60 miles per hour? I know you've heard those commercials. It goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, right? I know you've heard that in a commercial. And if not, we're not listening to the fine print part because they sure say it. Okay, 2 more. Braking distance. Where do we think braking distance? And it says to stop from 60 miles per hour. So let me describe. We're going 60 miles per hour and we have to stop. So they're saying it's the braking distance. Would we if something's a distance, would that be considered quantitative or qualitative? If it's a distance. Can distance be measured? Okay, what would be some possible units? I hope so, Chris, right? Hey, if it takes me, so yeah, I agree that it could totally, miles is absolutely a measurement of distance. This is a car stopping from 60 miles per hour. I really hope it doesn't take me miles to stop my car while it's going 60 miles per hour. But yes, miles is a distance measurement. It would likely be that it was like in meters or feet or something slightly more realistic. But yes, I totally agree with you. Okay, so braking, I'm gonna go with Chris's feet. Feet. And I see you too, Edgar. Meters and meters is just not typically a US convention, but yeah, it is much more reasonable in terms of length. I have lots of strong feelings about the fact that we have different measurement units than the rest of the world, so don't get me started, okay? All right, our final category is, yes, teen metric. I had a bumper sticker in high school that my dad was so embarrassed, but it said, actually he agreed, but like also was embarrassed of me. It says, somebody gave it to me and I was like obsessed with math, and it just said like switch to metric or die. Like it was really extreme, right? And I just like put it on like one of our cars on like the side, and he was like, I can't believe you did that to my car, you know? So it was not a good day for me. But I thought it was hilarious. So that's where I was going with it. I was just trying to be funny. Okay. Our final rating is reliability, and Kate and Chris are already on top of it. They're putting it in the chat. Are we qual or are we quan if we're talking about a vehicle's reliability? What if I told you that the vehicle's reliability was rated on a scale of 1 through 5? Would that be qual or quant? If it was 1 through 5? We've got some differing views here. Okay, here's the deal, guys. I want you to think about the last time someone told you to do a rating, right? Because they could have said it like this. 5 is much better than average. 4 is better. 3 is average. 2 is worse. 1 is much worse than average. They could have given us those options. Does 5, meaning much better than average, does it have measurement units attached to it? Or does 5 just mean much better than average? Jacinta changed her mind after that. Yes, Jacinta, I agree with you. If all I did was put a number that represents a word, then it's still qualitative. That is absolutely correct. So, and it actually has a specific name. It's called a Likert scale. Anytime you have a 1 through 5 scale, it's called a Likert scale. And 3 is like neutral, right? And then you can choose to be on either side of neutral. That is considered qualitative because there are no units of measure assigned to it. That is a very tricky concept. So yes, reliability would be considered qualitative, even if it was measured, excuse me, that was the wrong word, even if it was asked to be recorded as a number 1 through 5. Measuring is actually recording numerical values. So I didn't mean to say the word measure. Right, but I could record a 5 and I would still mean much better than average, but that doesn't mean I'm looking at a quantitative variable. That's tricky. Are we okay with that? And do we have any follow-up questions for that? Okay. There's one other thing I want to mention before we go and look at this fun data table below and try to identify some of the names of some of the types of variables just from the table without the words like in the paragraph. Okay. But one thing I want to mention is that there are some variables in the world that are more like questionable. Like sometimes they can be considered quantitative and sometimes they can be considered qualitative. And I want to give you an example. Okay. The example is me asking you, how old are you? But I don't give you a blank box to write your answer. Instead, I give you 15 to 25, 26 to 35, 36 to 45, 46 to 55, 56 or older. Those are the choices I give you. So I asked, how old are you? But I recorded a range of numbers, right? A category that you fall into. So if I don't specifically say, you know, how old are you? And your answer is, I'm 23 years old, right? That is a number with units. That is quantitative. But if you are asked, what's your age? And you check a box, that's qualitative. How many times in your life have you checked an age box? I can't even count it on 2 hands, right? It is half the time on YouTube. When I'm trying to watch something funny from last night. It's like, how old are you? I'm like, why do you care, YouTube? Come on, I'm just trying to watch Stephen Colbert. Like, I don't care. Who cares how old I am? You know, and but it's like a bunch of choices and they're just like trying to figure out the demographic of who's watching the video. You know what I mean? And I'm like, stop gathering my data. That's what I think. But it's so often that we're asked the same question and we could have answered it qualitatively or quantitatively. So I want you to just kind of be careful of like how you're recording that information. But if we can assign it units of measure, then it is absolutely quantitative. Okay. Now, remember, we did have an example just now. They were numbers, but they didn't have units. So it is totally possible. All right. We have 12 minutes. We're so going to see this data table before we leave, and then we'll leave the rest like nominal and ordinal. We'll just do that when we get back, like on next Tuesday. Okay. Because we should be able to do just a couple examples and then move on. If I feel like I need more time in class, I'll give you like a video of me solving something on my own or something like that to go over. But we should have plenty of time to get through this. I want to see this table before we leave, because in there are some numbers, some of which have units, some of which don't. So I've saved this page. I'm going to clear and scroll up so we can look at this data table together. I've seen exams in 2 different forms. One version of the exam where the paragraph is given just like we just saw, and we have to kind of pick apart the paragraph. Another version of an exam where a table is given and we have to do the same thing, but from within a table. So I want to give you both options to see if we could differentiate from within the data table. This data table contains information from Amazon, like Amazon music orders. Okay. So I want us to think of looking at this. Below are examples of purchase orders or album orders from Amazon. Use the data to answer the following questions. How many individuals are shown in the table above? So looking at this table, how many, well, okay, so first of all, are we looking at unique orders or unique people? Like, what are our subjects? Are the subjects the orders or the people who purchased them based on the information in the table? Okay. I want to be careful because if we look at the people who purchased them, Catherine is here twice from Ohio with the same area code. But she's listed 2 times uniquely. So Catherine made 2 purchases and showed up twice. So the subjects are not the people. The subjects are the unique orders that were purchased. Yes. So my subjects, the subjects are the orders. That is tricky. That is tricky. How do my people feel? I know I had a couple people who said the people. How do we feel about that? Are you feeling okay? Because we've got the same person listed 2 times and she's unique in both of those because it's a new order. So I want to make sure we feel okay about that. With that in mind, how many individual orders are shown or individual subjects in the table? Yes, I have to count Catherine as 2 unique orders. Thank you, Chris. That's what I was trying to get at. Okay, just to make sure we made that connection. There are 5 unique orders or unique individuals in the table, right? So 5 unique orders or 5 subjects were recorded. Good. Oh, I was going to go to the right, but it's B is below. Sorry, I'm like reading it left to right. B is right underneath. It says what kind of variable is price, but we just did this in the previous example. We know what price is, right? So tell me the type and the measurement units that you would think for price. It has to be quan, okay? What did we say? $10.99, $16.99, $15.98. What do we suppose the units are for price based on the information? Yes, Kate, I agree. We'll go with this same. Yes, dollars or USD. Yes, good. This is quantitative. Good. And it's dollars or. Good job. Good job. Excellent. What kind of variable is order number? Is it qualitative or quantitative? Order number. Ooh, we differ. Okay, my quants. If you say something's okay, Tiffany, I see you. But if you say something's quantitative, I argue that I have to get units out of it. So if this is quantitative, then I need you to give me units. And last time I placed an order for something, the order number wasn't truly meaningful to me, right? What it does is it sets me apart in Amazon as a unique order, but it has no units. It just tells me that I did that order and those are the random numbers that they generated in terms of my order number, right? To keep me set apart from everybody else. So there are no units attached to that. So that would be considered qualitative. And I actually have a further, I'm going to go even further and say that in parentheses, I'm going to tell you guys that it's also called an identifier variable. There are very specific, and I want you to tie this into your life, qualitative variables that are identifiers, like your social security number, your student ID number. These are numbers with no units that identify you and only you. That's why they're considered identifiers. So this order number is unique to that particular album. And when Catherine came back later that day and was like, I'm going to buy another album, she had another unique order number because it was a unique situation. Okay. So that's a new identifier for that second order. Okay. What kind of variable is area code? We're going to do it again. What kind of variable is area code? Qualitative or quantitative? Area code. Yeah, Chris, what do you know what the group is? Like, what is area code telling me? If it's putting me in a category, who else is in that category with me if they're in the same area code? I agree that it's qualitative. Yes. Well, and actually, I'm going to argue, Edgar, it might not even identify where I live, but it identifies where I bought my phone. Right? Because I know so many people who like went to college in California got like a new cell phone in California, moved back here, and now their new cell phone number is like 772 or whatever as their area code. And I'm like, what? Right? I am old school. I got a cell phone in Silver Spring, Maryland back in the day, and my area code is 301. I'm one of the last people to still have a 301 area code on my cell phone. It's awesome. Okay. So I'm never going to get rid of it. Right? Because it's like nobody has that anymore. It's very exciting. So I was like, I always think it totally identifies where I live. I would agree. But now I guess because people are more transient with their cell phones, it more identifies where I bought my phone if it's a cell phone number. Yeah. Okay. Awesome job. Okay. I know I want to, we only have a couple of minutes and I want to talk about what these two words right here mean before we have to run away on the next page, because I know you can see it on my screen. Ordinal versus nominal. And I want you to think that if something is ordinal, then it must be in order, right? There is some hierarchy. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It has to be in some sort of order. But if a variable is nominal, right, then the order is not relevant. And I want this to be like an immediate thought process to you. I know it right away. Like, I don't want us to have to think too difficultly about these, okay? So I'm just going to do the first two with you right now and ask yourselves, does order matter, right? So if I'm looking in letter A, the names of the streets in a town, I'm like, does order matter, right? If it's the names of streets in a town, technically, right, I could put them in any order I want to, and they would still be the same names of the streets in the town, right? Like, I guess you could put your street first, and that would make it the most important to you, but that's not an actual definitive order that everybody knows, right? This is every one of these values has a specific location in order. So good, this would be considered nominal. But then when we go to the movies and we get the movie ratings, G, PG, PG-13, R, and then NC-17, what would we consider these? Is the order relevant to the meaning? That's what we want to ask ourselves in terms of, is it ordinal, right? And if you look at that list, it's going like least offensive to most offensive, right? Like G is like, anybody, right? This is for kids. And NC-17 is like, no, you must be 17 or older, hard stop. You can't even go with a parent, right? So like, that's like very offensive content. So yes, this is order. This order determines like the ranking, right? So this is an ordinal variable. And with only 1 minute left, I know that you guys could think about the next two and we can talk about them on Tuesday, whether or not you feel really confident about them. But the last thing we're going to do on Tuesday morning, we'll finish up the ordinal, nominal, and discrete or versus continuous, and then talk a little bit about experiments, and we'll move right into chapter 2. Okay, but the take-home quiz is not for this chapter, is due next Wednesday, I believe. And if I feel like that's not enough time because we're still working on chapter 1 on Tuesday, then I will push the due date for everybody and I'll just move it in Canvas. So you guys have a little bit of time to still get it to me, quote, early. Okay. But I still want us to, like, you could work on it this weekend and just not finish it all, right? Like maybe you don't know how to do the experiment and observational study or the discrete or continuous part, but you could submit what you got and I could totally give you feedback on it early. Okay. And we can work from there and see where you're going. All right. Now I've totally made my time. All right. And I made it to 9:50. I know you're like, she could not talk for 2 hours. Yes, she can. Okay. You guys have been amazing. Thank you for a wonderful first week. I have so many introductory videos to watch. Please don't judge me for taking possibly until the end of the weekend to get comments to you all. but I plan to look at them all over the weekend and get back to everybody. Okay. So if you haven't done your video yet, get it to me by midnight tonight. And I will go ahead and give you some feedback on that, and then work on that take home quiz if you've got time over the weekend, and submit it to me early, see how it goes. Okay. Great work on your sampling methods. You freaking killed it. All right. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. You can hang back if you have a question for me, or you can come to office hours later. Okay.
Professor Bell.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, I noticed on the submission thing that you said it was incomplete. I actually had another submission. I had 2 files. One didn't have the ID, but then the second one did have the ID.
Okay. All right. I'm so sorry. Let me.
No, you're good. You're good. I know it was like the first one you saw, and that didn't have the ID on it, so it's fine.
Okay. Do me a favor because I'm going to sit for 2 hours in my next class, and I'm going to forget we had this conversation. Send me a Canvas message if you don't mind, real quick,
Yeah.
to remind me to look at it when I'm done with my next class, just so I can go back and take a look at the second one, because it's not going to tell me you have a new submission if it's already there. So I want to look at it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Yeah, no
it.
problem.
All right. Bye. Have a
All right. Have a good one. Any other questions for me before we head out? No, we're okay. Ashley, it was so lovely to see your child.
Thank you. I'm sorry,
my
my
day.
kids were kind of loud. I was trying to mute them.
It's okay. No worries. Ours can be too. It's fine. I understand. Do you have any questions for me before you head out?
I just have one comment. Thank you for being willing to leave comments on things. I've taken a bunch of online classes now, and like, sometimes I'm like, I know I have to find satisfaction from within, but it is so nice when a professor will comment like anything. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. Of course. My pleasure. That's my favorite part. I love it. Makes my life easier too, right? If I already graded it halfway through, I don't have to grade it all the way through the next time, but also you can feel like, well, I can do this and I don't have to redo this part. I just have to focus on the part that was the hardest for me. So we got this. Comments all over, and I will write on everything. Trust me. Have a great weekend. Natalia, do you have any questions for me before we head out? All right, I got to close out the Zoom and go to my next class, but I do have an office hour later at 1 o'clock if you need me. Okay. I'll see you guys next week.